Yeah, come in.
Kids, listen, I just finished playing this game. I gotta tell you all about it.
Jesus Christ.
Again?
If there's something strange sleeping in your bed, let me tell you something. If there's something weird sleeping in your bed, oh, let me tell you something. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Oh, kids, I have been waiting to get to this one. So much so that I did a collab with your gaming uncle, Pancake Detective. I might be doing the review of this game over here on my channel, but over on his channel, he's posting the full Let's Play. So if you want the entire experience, go check out his channel. I'm posting a link in the description below. For those of you who want to stick around for now and see the review and get the general basis of what we've got here, well, let me tell you a little story first. Once upon a time in 1984, a cultural phenomenon slammed full force into movie theaters and latched on to audiences with the kind of blockbuster chokehold that was, until then, unheard of in comedy movies. There were toys, cartoons, merchandise. Look, you kids all know what Ghostbusters is. You don't need me to tell you the concept of Ghostbusters, but think about this for a moment. Ghostbusters was the first comedy movie to use big budget special effects, and at the time of release was the highest grossing comedy movie ever, until Beverly Hills Cop came out a little later that same year and overtook it. Beverly Hills Cop and Ghostbusters were so good that they took the first and second slots for highest grossing films of 1984 respectively, with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in third. Like, can you imagine today a big budget comedy flick making more at the box office than like a Marvel movie? Because basically that's how that year worked. Ghostbusters was a rare vehicle that had a little bit of everything. While primarily a comedy, it was also a high concept sci-fi flick, a horror flick, an adventure film, and had some romance in there for good measure. Written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, the script deftly balanced a lot of different plates, and while filming, director Ivan Reitman encouraged improv between Aykroyd, Ramis, and of course, Bill fucking Murray! There's a whole fucking history behind the development of Ghostbusters that I could get into, like how the flick was originally written for Aykroyd and John Belushi to star in, or how Eddie Murphy was supposed to play Winston, or how one of Aykroyd's original scripts for the film was somewhere in the realm of 300 pages, but we're not here for that. We've got a video game to play. Ghostbusters the video game was developed by Terminal Reality and originally released back in 2009 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 to coincide with the film's 25th anniversary. For the 10th anniversary of the game, Saber Interactive remastered it for release on PC and modern consoles. Now, there'd been other Ghostbusters games done in the past, of which I remember playing Ghostbusters 2 on the NES just over and over and over again. The big draw here was that Terminal Reality had managed to entice all four original actors to return to voice their characters: Aykroyd, Ramis, Murray, and Ernie Hudson. Hell, Annie Potts returned to voice Janine, the Ghostbusters secretary. William Atherton voiced Walter Peck, the prick from the first flick, and Alyssa Milano signed on to play Alyssa, an anthropologist with a strange connection to the recent hauntings of New York. Aykroyd and Ramis also worked on the script, incorporating a lot of unused ideas from both the original film and the continually stalled third Ghostbusters movie, injecting a nostalgic flavor into the characters' dialogue. Topping off the interest in the game was that the player wouldn't be controlling the original Ghostbusters directly, but would be playing an unnamed recent hire, basically referred to as the Rookie, and would run around New York with the Ghostbusters firing proton packs and trapping ghosts. It's a concept that sells itself, and once the game released, it 100% did sell. In fact, Sony Pictures was so impressed with Terminal Reality being able to overcome Murray's legendary reluctance to have anything to do with a new Ghostbusters project that Sony greenlit production on 2 new Ghostbusters movies, the 2016 reboot and the recently released Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah, this game is directly responsible for Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig in Ghostbusters outfits, which on one hand should make us wince immediately, but I don't care what anyone says. Kate McKinnon as Holtzman in that movie was absolute genius, and I will hear nothing else on the subject.
You carry a lot of tension in your shoulders.
Well, all that being said, and considering the fact that Afterlife is about to hit theaters, it felt like the perfect time to revisit this modern classic and see just how well it holds up after the remaster. So when I played this game for the first time back in 2009, it felt like a dream come true. I've been a long-time Ghostbusters fan. I've got action figures, a toy of the Ectomobile. I watched the real Ghostbusters religiously every weekend. I fucking drank Ecto Cooler when it was a new thing and not an ironically re-released thing. Kids, I've been there, I've done that, and I've loved it ever since I was a young one like you. You couldn't go anywhere in the 80s without seeing Ghostbusters somewhere. And even though the second movie wasn't as well received, it was still a hit, and the cartoon ran well into the 90s. Sitting down to play this game for the first time, loading it up and firing a proton stream, oh my god. This shit felt like a dream come true, one that I never thought would ever happen. I literally sat and marathoned the whole game in one sitting, a decent 6-hour run that I've never done with any game since, completely fucking enraptured with hearing the voices of the actors, seeing their likenesses, blasting ghosts, running around through old and new set pieces in Ghostbusters lore, experiencing what is essentially the third Ghostbusters movie. Dan Aykroyd himself has said that this game is Ghostbusters 3. Yeah, playing this back in the day was akin to a religious experience. There was also a co-op multiplayer aspect that I played for months as well. You could unlock new Ghostbuster suits, abilities, and you basically ran around different arenas facing increasing waves of ghosts and goblins with up to 4 players at the same time. Sadly, the remaster doesn't include the multiplayer, even though Saber Interactive said they were working on it. That also was 2 years ago and pre-pandemic, so multiplayer is probably off the table at this point. So, here we are. Ghostbusters Afterlife is about to be in theaters, and I'm feeling the call to bust.
I myself never bust. I'm a proud member of NoFap.
So I played through this remaster and found that it doesn't really hold up as much as I remember it. This is probably partly in part due to aspects of the remaster, but there's parts of the base experience that just plain aggravate, much as I hate to admit it. First off, the story and vibe of the game is straight up classic ghost-busting goodness, which doesn't hurt that it comes out of Aykroyd and Ramis. It opens up with the classic Columbia Pictures logo circa 1984, and the game quickly lets us know that the story is set in 1991, just 2 years after the events of Ghostbusters 2. As I already mentioned, you play the Rookie, first day on the job as a Ghostbuster, and you follow around the legends as a wave of psychokinetic energy ripples across New York, awakening some familiar foes and faces. The game gets the fan service out of the way immediately by having you chase down Slimer to the Sedgwick Hotel, which leads to busting some other ghosts, and culminates in a showdown with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man himself. But the fan service serves the plot, as we discover that there is an exhibit on Gozer at the History Museum, which the character of Alyssa is curating. She also somehow happens to be at the site of most of the paranormal occurrences, which leads Egon and Ray to speculate that the activity might be centering around her. There's another couple callbacks that cleverly expand upon some already established lore. The library ghost from the first film, the mood slime from the second film, as well as Walter Peck, the Energy Commission rep who notoriously wants to shut down the Ghostbusters. What's neat about these aspects is that, in lesser hands, they'd just be the kind of fan service that is shoved into a project for no reason other than to sell some tickets and get fans to smile while shoving more popcorn in their faces and doing the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. But Aykroyd and Ramis take the time to make connections to the other films, providing history and backstory and reasons for their existence, so the game really does feel like the culmination of an ongoing story that began all the way back in the first film. It's honestly really impressive, especially when you consider that the game script uses pieces of the unproduced third Ghostbusters movie, which would have been titled Hell hellbent and featured an alternative New York in a hell world dimension. It's fun to see what kind of set pieces the boys can play with when they're not limited to a film budget. There's the flooded hotel while chasing down the fisherman ghost, chasing Stay Puft through the streets of Manhattan and then dangling from the side of a building to finish him off. There's the library, which transforms into the alternate hellscape library, the history museum, which comes to life, a hidden ghost island that rises up out of the river, and a massive cemetery inside a fully transformed Central Park. There's even more than that, showcasing strange, Lovecraftian diesel punk technology that was built by a crazed architect back in the 1920s. The plot pulls no punches and pulls out all the stops, and from start to finish absolutely nails the sensation of being the third film in the Ghostbusters trilogy. What the game does best in homage to the original films and even the cartoon is that it remembers that while Ghostbusters is a fun, comedic romp about some average Joes who defy the laws of physics in pursuit of capturing ghosts, the franchise can get really scary sometimes. Take this moment in the library, for example.
It's children. What are they saying? I think they're trying to tell us something. What else did Hoover collect?
Now, for context, at this point in the game, we're working on tracking down the library ghost, aka the Gray Lady, and it becomes apparent that a serial killer bookworm known as the Collector was the one responsible for her death. It's implied that there's other victims of his, possibly also in the library, and then we go through the children's section to the sound of children crying for their mommy. There's another area later on where we have to return to the Sedgwick Hotel because there's a power node channeling the Gozerian energy there, and we stumble onto the ghost of a supernatural serial killer called the Spider Witch, who used to lure men to her hidden hotel room and sacrifice them for unsavory reasons. The whole section is covered in webs and whispers and a couple of low-key jump scares to keep you uneasy. Even Egon is uneasy here. Look at this.
I say, young lady, you are full of surprises. After you, Lively.
Well, that was terrifying. Be extremely careful. This is likely to be a point of dangerous concentration.
Some parts of the game ask you to pull up your PKE meter to track ghost energy and lures you into a first-person jump scare. It's not going to make Watch Mojo's list of top scariest games you need to play, nor does it ever lean into that area. But there's enough creepiness coupled with a few straight-up horrifying moments that it tickles the base of your brain that wants to check the closets right before bed for monsters. By the end of the game, with the true villain revealed, connections to both of the movies set in place, the game ends on a somewhat abrupt note, with the rookie getting fired, but offered the opportunity to buy into starting up a Ghostbusters franchise in Chicago. It's a little insulting after doing so much work as the so-called rookie while saving the asses of the pros throughout the game, and compared to the movies that end in a big number where the Busters get celebrated by throngs of New Yorkers, here we get a bit of a letdown in that everyone escapes Central Park and then we're basically done. Although there is a clever little bit where Venkman avoids getting slimed by shoving his love interest into Slimer's path, and yeah, that was kind of funny. I like that. Overall, the story itself is pretty well done, but, well, as much as it pains me to say this, most of the problems I had with it lie in some of the line deliveries and the overuse of certain one-liners. Bill Murray totally sounds like he's phoning it in at the start of the game. It took quite a bit before it sounded like he was comfortable doing his voice work. Murray's shtick usually operates on him having this boyish charm and impishness in his physical acting, so when it's just him and his voice, the standard Bill Murray charm doesn't always translate. Peter Venkman, as a character, has and always will be the type of dude that few of us actually want to associate with. But in the hands of Bill Murray, he becomes a playful jerk with a heart of gold. Here in the game, most of his jerkish qualities come through without the benefit of Murray's playfulness, and that detracts from his performance by, like, a lot. By the end of the game, it gets a lot better, but the one thing I couldn't swallow at all was Bill Murray as Alyssa Milano's love interest. I don't care that they're voicing animated characters. It's even visually apparent between the two of them that Alyssa is just too young for Venkman, and his pursuit of her just gets kind of creepy. Outside of Bill Murray, there's a plethora of one-liners that the Busters shout frequently. A little too frequently. Sometimes those lines are okay, sometimes they're fair, sometimes I just really want the boys to shut the fuck up and stop telling me to not cross the streams. You've already told me that a dozen goddamn times, and yet here we are, still shooting proton streams, crisscross applesauce at 17 ghosts floating around us, and there isn't much room to maneuver. They're going to cross, motherfucker! Stop telling me to not cross the streams! Stop! Alright. Okay, so... It'd be like that a little bit. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely some good material here, sometimes even great material. It's classic Aykroyd and Ramis writing with lines at a cadence you won't hear anywhere else. And the sheer fact that it's all four original Ghostbusters together for the last time, I was willing to forgive a little bit. Harold Ramis passed away in 2014, and as such the game opens with a dedication to the late actor. From the perspective of getting the original actors together, having them write the script, and then all perform the voice work, this is a monumental achievement. Of course, just pulling together the old crew isn't going to automatically make a good game. And fortunately for us, Terminal Reality has really solid gameplay underneath the hood. Kind of like a Star Wars game with lightsabers, nothing else in Ghostbusters is going to work unless the proton packs feel good to use. And boy, howdy do they. Wrangling ghosts is supremely fun. Mostly more in the beginning by the end, but the initial couple of hours using the streams are sublime. You whittle down ghostly resilience bit by bit until they're worn out enough to loop a capture stream around them, and then you can guide them into a containment trap. Of course, ghosts don't go down easily, so you'll have to smack them around a little bit to stun them, and then you can force them into the trap. Now, some ghosts are going to put up more of a fight than others, and it'll take some wrangling. And also making this a little tricky is that the proton packs can overheat, with a meter on the side of the pack that tells you how much heat is built up. You'll have to manually vent the pack so it doesn't overheat, because if it does, it'll automatically vent itself, which takes longer to do than the manual vent, leaving you a lot more vulnerable than you want to be. Proton blasting quickly becomes natural and intuitive, and as you progress through the game, you'll earn money from bagging ghosts and also scanning objects with your PKE meter. The game will prompt you when there's something hidden nearby, whether it's a secret item or a mission-specific item, and when you pull up the PKE, you'll switch to a first-person view and follow the prompts until you can scan it. Scanning ghosts in the middle of combat can also reveal their weaknesses and make extra money as well. Using that money to upgrade your pack makes blasting easier and more powerful. Of course, not every ghost is going to be susceptible to the proton stream, and since you're the rookie, you get to test some new experimental equipment Egon has been working on.
When do you have the time to work on all this stuff, Egon?
I've been conducting an experiment in which I sleep an average 14 minutes a day. Leaves me a lot of time to work.
Great. Ready to roll.
Some of these include a stasis blast that slows ghosts down, the mood slime that we saw in Ghostbusters 2, and a high-energy rapid-fire meson blaster. Each of these have alt-fire modes, and using them in tandem will definitely help tackle ghosts a lot quicker. One of the few gripes I have about this, though, is that sometimes I wasn't entirely sure which blaster to use on which ghosts. Sometimes it's fairly obvious. Anything possessing a physical object that runs around on the ground is going to be susceptible to the stasis beam's shotgun blast. Larger monsters made out of black slime will go down faster when coated in mood slime, and the meson blaster just generally chips away at everything pretty quickly. But I had a few times where I thought I was using what I needed to use on the right ghost, but it felt like I was just standing there blasting away for what felt like forever with little effect. Also, shit howdy, be prepared to get knocked down. A lot. One thing this game doesn't skimp on is difficulty. I played this on the experienced setting, which is the normal difficulty, and I got knocked down my ass so many times, I'm not sure I can even count. Health works on a Call of Duty regeneration bit, and you can look at your proton pack to see where your health is at. Take too many hits and you're done for, but you can be revived if the boys are still up and running. It's a mechanic in the gameplay that the Ghostbusters can get knocked down by the ghosts, and the weight of the proton packs makes it difficult to get back up. So when that happens, you need to run over and help them up. Simultaneously, if it happens to you, they'll run over to get you back on your feet. Usually. Sometimes they get caught up in busting ghosts and take a moment or two to run over to you, which makes it real tense when you're in the middle of a nasty fight and you go down down, and then you watch helplessly as your pals fall over one by one before any can get to you. In fact, later on in the game, the Ghostbusters will have a tendency to keep falling over while you're trying to battle ghosts, and you'll spend more time hustling over to help them up on their feet than you will actually blasting. I thought for sure during a couple of boss fights that there was no way I was actually going to make it through because I just couldn't turn and fight anything since the crew kept falling over. What doesn't help is that the difficulty is all over the place. I had more than a few combat situations where I thought I was breezing through a little too easily, only to turn around and be confronted by something that would knock everyone down in the span of 30 seconds. The library boss is a nightmare monster that you absolutely have to stay away from or you're just done for. And there's a fight near the end against some cherubic statues that dive bomb you to smithereens. In the latter case, I needed to lasso them with a capture stream and bash them into an unbreakable gate to proceed, something which wasn't apparent in the slightest, and every time I died I had to go through another minute of dialogue before the attack would start up again. This is a constant issue throughout the whole game, where if you're not on top of what you're using to battle the boos, you can get overwhelmed entirely too quickly and have to start over again. And even restarting a battle won't ensure anything, as the AI for the busters sends them immediately into the thick of things, and they'll sometimes walk right into death and danger, and you'll have no choice but to attempt a rescue amid a swarm of ghouls. Still, the controls are tight enough, responsive enough, and appropriately early 2000s over-the-shoulder shooter goodness, so even when you're struggling, you still feel fairly in control of everything. I really can't imagine playing this on the hard difficulty though. Just thinking about the flying, swarming library books that hit you hard and fast, one right after the other, makes me shudder to wonder what hard would be like with those. And the game still looks good too, thanks to Saber Interactive's remaster of the graphics. While the 2009 PS3 models and shininess are, well, 2009 PS3 models, there's a great overhaul that's been done to the textures and detail of the world. Ghostbusters is a very, very pretty game, despite some of the environments still having some muddier textures and poly counts that generation of hardware was limited to. Honestly, this becomes the most apparent when the game switches between in-game graphics and pre-rendered cutscenes, which are 100% 7th generation console cinematics, no getting around that. It's kind of hard to be mad at the digital artifacts here, considering that the rest of the game is so visually striking, but it is sometimes a little jarring to jump from crisp graphics to muddy CGI. One of the things that I noticed was that the game really wanted to cap the frame rate to 30 FPS. In fact, the game didn't really want me to run on advanced settings at all. I kept having to go in and change the graphic settings every time I started up the game, which was only mildly annoying. It's kind of hard to grasp how some games just don't save your settings whenever you change them, especially visually. I could absolutely tell whenever I forgot to tweak things because that frame rate was super sticky. In fact, there's a lot of things that are kind of sticky in this game. I had a number of glitches throughout my experience, ranging from Ghostbusters forgetting to come rescue me to ghosts getting stuck in walls. I was honestly shocked because it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's pretty glaring. I ended up having to reload checkpoints a handful of times just to maintain progression because something bugged out. One major bug that I didn't discover until after my playthrough was done happened when I tried to start up the game using mouse and keyboard versus the gamepad, which is what I used during recording. I figured I'd go back in and see how the mouse and keyboard work to get kind of a comparison on the controls, but when I tried loading a save, the game outright crashed, something it didn't do once during my time with it. I figured it was unremarkable, so I started up again, but nope, I tried 3 more times and the game crashed every single time. So finally I tried booting it up with the gamepad plugged in, but used the mouse and keyboard instead, and wouldn't you know it, the game worked fine. That was a wild one, kids. I've never had a game kick me out because it didn't like the mouse controls I wanted to use. Needless to say, I didn't get any footage out of that because the game crashed every time and I wasn't exactly inspired to give it another try. When you factor the various handfuls of glitches and bugs that rear their heads every here and there, and throw in the random difficulty spikes and the AI's affinity for getting in harm's way, the game floats effortlessly between fun and frustrating, usually tilting towards fun, I think. Ghostbusters is a game all about the little things. There are details everywhere that help immerse the player into the world of the films, and establishes this game's place in the canon of the overall story. One of my favorites is a little throwaway gag in the firehouse that shows Louis Tully's ghostbusting uniform and the earmuffs he wore at the end of Ghostbusters 2, with a little note saying he'd called out sick for the day, which is exactly something Louis would do. There's also the painting of Vigo the Carpathian from the second film, and they somehow roped Max von Sydow to perform the voice so that you can interact with it.
Oh, I have an itch right here. Foolish mortal. Look deep inside yourself and ask if this was a true victory.
There is so much attention to detail and passion for the franchise here. They even used Elmer Bernstein's iconic score throughout the game, throwing in a few original cues that match the score as well. Just look at the opening menu and tell me that this doesn't make you smile. Of course, the downside to this is that you'll end up hearing the same cues from that score over and over again, so much so that it'll be wormed into your brain and you'll long for something else at times. If I don't hear the Gozer theme again for a long time, I might be happy. But that brings us back to all the little things. For all the tiny details this game nails, there's also a handful of tiny measures that work against it. A strange balancing act that makes the game fun to be a part of and experience, but also makes it a bit of a slog. The final little bit that both does and doesn't work is that the game is very obviously telling a linear experience, leading you down a set path with set lines for the Ghostbusters to recite, and room for exploring is minimal at best. So if you're in for the game, you're in for a strictly cinematic experience, and you'll either enjoy that or you won't. I found myself straddling that line, mostly engaged by the game's pacing, sometimes just wanting to pick it up a little or go exploring and look around on my own. Kids, this is the first time I've played this game since it first came out 12 years ago, and my memory of the original experience was nothing but roses. I was prepared to hop into this game and have a wonderful time and recommend it to you wholeheartedly. And yet, much as I hate to say it, it's a somewhat flawed experience that gets everything right that it absolutely has to get right, while tripping occasionally along the way. One of the things about the Ghostbusters franchise as a whole is something that I don't think a lot of people really want to say out loud, but Ghostbusters wasn't the kind of movie that needed a sequel. It's perfectly self-contained, it sticks every landing, it wastes no time and leaves the audience feeling satisfied. So of course audiences wanted more, and oh, the corporate gods gave us more, but everything we've gotten since then hasn't been nearly as good as that first outing. Yes, even the cartoon. Now the cartoon is a classic. Don't get me wrong, but not every episode is a banger. Ghostbusters 2 is defendable, and I really actually love that movie, but it's not as good as the first one, and is even a little silly in places. So, Ghostbusters the video game, being not quite as good as we want it to be, is actually kind of on brand. For what it's worth, the story, the gameplay, the experience as a whole is viscerally, wonderfully Ghostbusters, and it both captures and completes the films with flair. And you know what? This game is fun. It's fun being a Ghostbuster. It's fun blasting things with a proton pack. It's funny to listen to the boys interact. And what other game is going to have a group of ghosts from the Civil War come back to life inside a museum and reenact a battle from the war, complete with a bugle and cannon fire in the background? At the same time, for as much fun as you're going to have with this title, you're definitely going to feel some frustration along the way. As an actual game, Ghostbusters gets a 7.5 out of 10. But for the sheer act of being a worthy follow-up to the original films, it's always going to be a 10 in my heart. Alright kids, I've gone on about this shit long enough. There's a movie out this week to go see, and while I'm definitely nervous about whether or not Afterlife will actually be a good flick, I think we can all agree that more Ghostbusters, even when it doesn't hit every mark, is always a good thing. Unless it involves Melissa McCarthy. I just can't fucking stand her. Go buy yourself some Ecto Cooler if you can find it, get thee to the theater and grab some overly buttered popcorn, and save me a seat, kids. I'll see you when I get there.